I transmigrated into a rich family recognition novel as the poor real young master, and the whole family looked at me like trash. My sister, disgusted by my sour smell, tossed me a bank card and said, "Take the money and behave yourself like a transparent person." The fake young master added hypocritically, "Brother, if you're short of money, I can give you all my pocket money." Unexpectedly, I expressionlessly continued carrying trays, leaving only one sentence behind. "We'll talk after I get off work." Chapter 1. Grease solidified on the corner of the cheap plastic table from the kitchen. The sour rancid odor of fried food mixed with the pungent sweetness of a low-grade air freshener, clinging stickily to people's skin. As I wiped the table with a rag, memories belonging to another soul slowly but firmly fused into me, like a dull knife cutting flesh. "You're wasting your time in a place like this." A sharp female voice pierced through the restaurant's noise. I looked up. A group of 5 stood there, a middle-aged man in a suit, a middle-aged woman with tear-reddened eyes and dripping in jewelry, 2 young women dressed in this season's haute couture with disgusted expressions as if they wished to stay at least 3 meters away from everything around them, and a handsome young man in a soft knit sweater, his gaze clean and carrying just the right amount of concern, quietly protected by the others. They did not belong in this crowded, greasy fast food joint. They were like a flock of peacocks strayed into the slums. My memory snapped into place. I was no longer the corporate slave who died suddenly after 72 hours of overtime. I was now the real young master George. In this melodramatic dog blood recognition novel full of cliches, the people in front of me were my blood relatives whom I had never met, and the fake young master, Makoto, who had enjoyed all their love in my stead. The one who just spoke was my second sister, Sabrina. She covered her nose, her beautiful brows furrowed tightly as if breathing in another whiff of this air would poison her. "Look at you, you reek of poverty. You've completely disgraced the Ito family name." My eldest sister, Monica, was more restrained, but the coldness and judgment in her eyes cut deeper. She didn't say anything at first. Instead, she drew a card from her limited edition handbag and flicked it onto the table I had just cleaned, her movements as dismissive as if she were throwing alms at a beggar. "There's 100,000 inside. Spend it sparingly. Take the money, keep a low profile, and don't cause us trouble when you return." Their father, Simon Ito, kept a stern face and said nothing. His gaze swept over my faded t-shirt and apron before landing on my face. It wasn't the look of a father reunited with his lost son, it was the appraisal of a defective item. Their mother, Helen, had been crying the whole time, pressing a handkerchief to her eyes as her voice trembled. "George, my poor child, how can you be in a place like this? Come home with Mom. I'll make it up to you." Makoto, protected at the center, stepped forward at just the right moment. His voice was low and choked with guilt, perfectly timed. "Brother, I'm sorry, it's all because of me. If I hadn't taken your place. Brother, if you need money, I can give you all of my pocket money. Just don't make Dad, Mom, and our sisters worry." His eyes turned slightly red, his sincerity on full display. I clutched the rag in my hand, my expression flat as I watched this family put on their performance. The faint hope and grievance left behind in the original body's memory were ruthlessly crushed by me. Where were they before? The original had stumbled through an orphanage, gone hungry, been bullied, struggled into university with scholarships and student loans, and worked 3 jobs a day to pay tuition and living expenses. Where were these blood relatives then? Now that I was finally close to graduating, finally able to support myself, they suddenly appeared to act out a touching family reunion. Ridiculous. I threw the rag back into the bucket with a light splash, cutting through Makoto's act. "I get off work at 5. My voice was calm, neither happy nor angry. "If you have something to say, wait until then." The whole family froze, clearly not expecting this response. Sabrina flushed with anger, shouting, What did you say? You want us to wait for you? What else?" I shot back, not even bothering to glance at them again as I turned toward another messy table. "I'm working." Makoto looked wounded, biting his lip lightly, his eyes even more sorrowful. Helen cried harder. Simon frowned deeply, finally letting out a cold grunt from his nose. Wait, so this group of glamorous, high-class aristocrats ended up sitting stiffly in this greasy, noisy fast food restaurant, enduring the curious stares of strangers, waiting sullenly for me, an hour. Chapter 2. The Ito family's villa was indeed luxurious, gilded gates, a soaring ceiling living room, and a crystal chandelier so dazzling it made people dizzy. Clad in cheap street market clothes, I stood on the mirror-like marble floor, looking like a homeless drifter who had wandered into a palace, completely out of place. Simon seemed too lazy to spare me another glance. Helen had also stopped crying, though her eyes were still red. The two of them probably felt they had fulfilled their duty. Simon tapped a few times on his phone, and my shabby second-hand cell phone buzzed. A bank notification appeared. Deposit, 100,000. 00 yuan. I whistled inwardly. Free money, 100 grand. Sweet. but my face remained calm as I put the phone away. Helen opened her mouth, as if wanting to say something, but finally just sighed. George, if you need anything, just tell Mom. For now, let Makoto and Monica help you get familiar with the place. After speaking, she hurried upstairs with her husband, as though staying even one more second was unbearable. The moment our parents left, the atmosphere changed completely. Monica crossed her arms and looked down her nose at me, saying, "There are strict rules in this house. Don't bring your street habits inside. Breakfast is at 7 sharp, don't be late. No bringing shady people home. The study on the second floor and the east suite belong to Dad and Makoto. Don't go barging in. Watch your behavior, and don't embarrass the Ito family in public." Sabrina added, with even sharper malice, "Look at your filthy self. Clean up before you go upstairs. The servant's room has been prepared for you. Stay out of the main house when you've got nothing to do. You're an eyesore." Makoto spoke gently, as if trying to smooth things over, but his words cut deeper with every line. "Brother, my sisters are only thinking of you. Afraid you won't get used to things here. If there's anything you don't understand, you can always ask me. And my belongings, you can use them first if you need to." His gaze carried pity, along with a barely perceptible sense of superiority. I lowered my eyes and hummed vaguely in response, my attitude as perfunctory as listening to a supermarket sales pitch. Inside, I sneered, "Rules. These people are just putting gold on their own faces." My impenetrable indifference only made Monica and Sabrina angrier. They glared at me fiercely a few times before storming upstairs. The living room was left with only me and Makoto. The gentle mask on Makoto's face instantly fell away, revealing only cold disgust and smugness. He leaned in close, his voice low and dripping with malice. "Beggar, do you see it? Everything here belongs to me. Dad and Mom's love, my sister's protection. This privileged life, you can't take a single thing away. Even if you've come back, you're still a pauper, only worthy of picking up my leftovers. If you know what's good for you, get lost." At last, I lifted my eyelids to look at him. My gaze was calm, almost bored, as if watching a clown jump around. I asked, "Finished? If so, I'm going to my room." Makoto felt like he had punched cotton, his face turning pale with fury as he glared viciously at my back. The so-called servant's room was tucked away in a corner on the first floor, narrow, damp, and filled with the musty smell of long disuse. I didn't care. I locked the door, pulled out my phone, and examined that 100,000. The original owner's account had only a few hundred yuan left for living expenses. This sudden windfall stuck out like a sore thumb. I let out a cold laugh, didn't touch a single cent, and directly downloaded a few investment apps to study short-term products. The Ito family's money disgusted me, but if I used it to make more money, then fine. The rest of the day passed quietly. I stayed holed up in my room and didn't come out until dinner was about to start. Just as I reached the staircase, I heard faint footsteps behind me. Makoto's voice followed, cloying with false warmth. "Brother, are you going down to eat?" I didn't look back and kept walking. Suddenly, my wrist was seized. Makoto's fingers were ice cold and forceful, nearly digging into my flesh. I instinctively tried to shake him off, but then I heard his hurried, venomous whisper, meant only for the two of us. "You'll never beat me in your life, beggar." The next second, Makoto abruptly let go, releasing a terrified scream. His whole body crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut, tumbling down the stairs in an absurdly exaggerated, twisted pose. Bang, thud, ah. The sound of a heavy body rolling and his sharp wails echoed throughout the villa. Downstairs in the dining room, Monica and Sabrina, who had been setting the table, leapt up in shock. They watched in horror as their beloved brother rolled down the stairs, crashing onto the cold marble floor, curling up in pain, his forehead swelling red at once. "Makoto!" Monica screamed in panic. Sabrina snapped her head up, her gaze like a blade stabbing into me, as if she could tear me apart. "George, what did you do to Makoto? Get out of the Ito family." Makoto lay on the ground, eyes brimming with tears, his breathing weak, yet still struggling to explain. "And no, it wasn't brother, sisters. I just lost my footing, really. It wasn't him who pushed me." Those words only sealed my guilt. Monica rushed to help him up, while Sabrina, trembling with rage, jabbed her finger at the front door and shrieked, "Get out, do you hear me? Our Ito family doesn't need a vicious creature like you. Get out." I stood at the top of the stairs, watching this farce with cold eyes. Makoto's acting was clumsy and overdone, and my two sisters' favoritism was so blatant even a blind man could see it. The corner of my lips twitched, but my face remained expressionless as I slowly smoothed the wrinkle Makoto had left on my sleeve. When Sabrina screamed, "Get out," a second time, I finally spoke, calmly, without raising my voice. Yet my words cut clear through Makoto's sobs and her curses. "My advice, check the surveillance before you start barking." With that, I didn't spare the family of dramatists another glance. I descended the stairs unhurriedly, walked past the collapsed Makoto and the sisters huddling around him, and headed straight for the front door. Behind me rang Sabrina's furious "stand still," and Makoto's even more pitiful cries. At the entryway, my hand touched the doorknob. I paused slightly. Monica was already on the phone, her voice low and urgent as she called an ambulance. Amid the noise, I caught Makoto's barely suppressed but unmistakable note of triumph, and Sabrina's tearful scolding. "Even if it's to drive that bumpkin out, you didn't have to really fall down the stairs. That must hurt so much." A cold smile curled my lips. "So that's it. A bitter trick scheme, a setup. All just to throw me, the eyesore real young master, out of this house." I opened the door. The night wind rushed in, severing me completely from the false warmth and hollow luxury behind me. Without hesitation, I stepped into the darkness, hailed a cab, and went straight back to my university dorm. Chapter 3. The next day, my life returned to normal. Classes, part-time jobs, the library, a simple routine, busy and fulfilling. The 100,000 yuan from the Ito family sat untouched in my account. Nothing more than a string of meaningless digits. With scholarships, student loans, and the money I earned working, I lived comfortably enough. I even used some of my own savings for short-term investments, earning modest profits. Half a month passed uneventfully. No one from the Ito family contacted me, as if I had never existed. I was glad for the peace. Until one evening, after finishing a part-time shift, I was walking back to campus, tired but steady, when 3 people blocked the road under a streetlight near the dorms. Makoto sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in exaggerated plaster casts and bandages, his face pale and fragile. The moment he saw me, his eyes reddened. He struggled as if to stand, his voice hoarse and broken with sobs. Brother, you've finally come back. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I was wrong. Please come home. Mom and Dad miss you so much." Sabrina stood behind the wheelchair, arms crossed, her eyes on me as though I were garbage. She snapped impatiently. "George, Makoto's begging you like this, and you're still putting on airs. Don't push your luck." Eldest sister Monica stood a little farther back, cold and silent, her gaze sharp with judgment and a hint of something more complicated. She had checked the surveillance, but the cameras had just happened to be broken. She hadn't spoken the truth, but neither did she fully believe Makoto. I stopped, glanced over the 3 of them, and found the whole scene absurd. I said nothing, waiting for their performance. Makoto kept crying, his acting flawless. "Brother, the family can't go on without you. It's all my fault. I never should have existed. As long as you'll come back, I'll do anything." "Enough," I finally spoke, my voice carrying a chill in the night wind. "Drop the act, fake young master." Makoto's sobs cut off instantly. The grief on his face froze in place. Sabrina's brows shot up. "Who are you calling a fake young master?" I ignored her, my eyes landing on Makoto's heavily plastered leg. I arched a brow. "Half a month, and it hasn't healed. You fell down the stairs, not from a skyscraper." "What? Did the Ito family hire a quack doctor?" The ridicule in my tone was undisguised. "You." Sabrina fumed. Makoto turned paler, his tears falling harder, as if suffering the greatest injustice. I sneered, stepping past them, ready to leave. "Stop." Monica finally spoke, her voice low and cold. "George, apologize to Makoto, then come back with us. Dad said you must return." I turned back, looking at her as if she were a fool, and said, "He said it. That's worth shit. How dare you?" Sabrina shrieked. Just then, a spoiled, arrogant female voice cut in. Well, what a scene. "Makoto, is this your so-called real brother who can't show his face in public?" A bright red sports car was parked by the curb. From it stepped a young woman, stylishly dressed, her makeup flawless. She strode over in a few steps, planting herself beside Makoto's wheelchair. She hooked her arm through his, her eyes sweeping me from head to toe with open disdain. TSK. The looks aren't bad, but the vibe, like some trash picker off the streets. Curling her lip, she sneered at me. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Can't you see reality? Makoto is the one who truly matches the Kim family, the one who grew up with us. Who the hell are you? You think you can compete with him? Go crawl back to wherever you came from." I remembered then, her name was Sophia Kim, Makoto's childhood shadow. Her family had business ties with the Ito family, and rumor had it she and Makoto had an informal childhood engagement. A textbook die-hard Makoto supporter, Makoto's expression grew even more pitiful when he saw her. "Sophia, don't talk about my brother like that." Sophia patted his hand tenderly. "Makoto, you're just too kind. People like him should be thrown out directly." She glared at me. "Did you hear that? Beggar, don't dream above your station. The Ito family isn't something you can climb up to." Her brainless tirade amused me. My gaze swept past Sophia indifferently, landing on Monica and Sabrina. "Do the Ito family choose their heirs in reverse order of IQ? How else do you keep attracting this kind of trash?" What did you say? Sophia bristled instantly. Monica's face darkened. Sabrina looked ready to charge at me, but I had no patience left for their little play acting. I pulled out my phone and, right in front of them, made a transfer. Ding. Makoto's phone chimed with a notification. Instinctively, he pulled it out. The next second, his face went completely pale. It was a bank message. George has transferred 100,000 yuan to your account. Note, consider it your medical expenses. Don't thank me. The full 100,000, not a cent missing, returned exactly as it came. I pocketed my phone, my eyes turning utterly cold, carrying a detached superiority. The Ito family's money disgusts me. My gaze swept across Makoto's stunned face, Sophia's shock, Monica and Sabrina's livid expressions. And let me be clear, it's not that the Ito family drove me out. I paused, then enunciated every word with icy precision. I don't want you. From now on, stay out of my life. Without another glance, I turned and walked toward the dormitory building, my back straight. My figure quickly disappeared into the shadow of the doorway. Only a few ashen faces remained under the streetlight, Makoto clutching his phone with the transfer message glowing mockingly in his hand. The streetlights stretched their shadows long and twisted, frozen in the air in front of the dorm. The only sound was the low hum of Sophia's still idling sports car. George's words, "I don't want you," were like a silent slap across Monica and Sabrina's faces, leaving them livid. Makoto's knuckles whitened as he gripped his phone, the glow of that transfer notification stabbing at his eyes. What does he mean by that? Sabrina was the first to recover, her voice shrill and breaking. He's just a beggar. Who the hell does he think he is? Talking like that, giving us 100,000. Is he trying to treat us like beggars? Sophia finally snapped out of it too, scoffing as if she'd heard the funniest joke in the world. She tightened her hold on Makoto's arm, pretending to be some big shot. Who knows where that money even came from? Probably the savings from hauling bricks on a construction site. Makoto, don't mind him. He's just bluffing. Shut up. Monica's cold voice cut her off. Her eyes, however, were locked on the dormitory doorway where George had disappeared. Her brows furrowed. She kept replaying his gaze in her mind, cold, detached, even tinged with pity. And that note, "Consider it your medical expenses." Where had he gotten the money? From the card their parents gave. He hadn't touched a cent. He returned it. This was nothing like what she had expected. Nothing like the story Makoto had told. Makoto felt Monica's silence and scrutiny, and his heart lurched. He couldn't let the fragile situation he had crafted be undone by George's dismissive words and a single transfer. Immediately, he coughed violently, curling weakly into the back of his wheelchair, his voice frail and wavering. "Sister, don't blame my brother. It's my fault. I shouldn't have gone to him. I made him angry. Let's go back." "I'm cold." At once, Sabrina's focus shifted. She crouched down to fuss over the edge of his clothes, which didn't even need straightening, her voice dripping with concern. All right, we'll go back. Don't mind that ungrateful bastard. Sister, let's take Makoto home to rest." Sophia quickly chimed in. "Yes, Makoto's health is the most important. Don't waste your energy on people like him." Monica took a deep breath, swallowing down her doubts. She glanced once more at the dormitory doors, then finally nodded. "Let's go." She pushed Makoto's wheelchair toward the family's luxury car parked nearby. But before leaving, she turned her head one last time toward that ordinary dorm building entrance. Her expression conflicted. Chapter 4. The following days, my life remained steady and routine. Classes, part-time work, the library, and occasionally checking the small investments I had made. As for the 100,000 yuan from the Ito family, I finally placed it into a stable short-term fund. Consider it seed money saved up for the original body, to eventually leave the Ito family behind. Sometimes I ran into Sophia on campus. This young lady seemed determined to fight on Makoto's behalf. Every time she saw me, she either rolled her eyes dramatically or loudly gossiped with her friends. Some people may dress up decently, but they can't hide their cheap, shabby roots. Even if a barnyard chicken perches on a tree branch, it won't become a phoenix, especially when the branch doesn't even want it. I treated it all as noise, even finding it slightly amusing. I could practically feel Sophia's frustration each time her taunts failed to get a rise out of me, leaving her fuming with nowhere to vent. Until one day, at a public finance lecture, the university had invited a well-known industry analyst. I sat toward the middle back rows, taking notes attentively. Sophia and Makoto, along with their entourage, sat at the front, Makoto still in his wheelchair with his leg in plaster, drawing sympathetic glances from those around. During the QA session, the analyst brought up a current hot market case study. With a smile, he asked if any students wanted to share their views. Sophia's eyes lit up. She shot her hand up before the analyst could even call on anyone and blurted out loudly, "Professor, let Makoto answer. He's the star of our department, and his family runs a company. He must have unique insights." She even cast me a smug glance over her shoulder. Her implication obvious. Makoto, suddenly put on the spot, put on a show of modest hesitation before speaking up. He gave a textbook answer, something one could easily find in books or online. It sounded polished enough to impress his sycophants and a handful of naive classmates, who rewarded him with polite applause. The analyst maintained his polite smile, nodding. This student has a solid grasp of the basics. Sophia's smirk deepened with pride. But then the analyst's gaze swept across the hall, searching for a different perspective. His eyes landed on a quiet figure in the back row. Me. You there in the back. You seem to have another opinion. Why don't you share it? Instantly, every pair of eyes turned toward me. Sophia's face collapsed as if she had swallowed a fly. Makoto's hand on his wheelchair armrest tightened almost imperceptibly. I blinked, surprised at being chosen. Setting down my pen, I stood and spoke calmly. Professor, I think the previous analysis overlooked a few key factors. First, the hidden risks of the current policy window, which the market is largely underestimating. Second, the substitution effect in the core raw material supply chain, which cannot realistically achieve cost optimization for at least the next 2 quarters. Third, the short-term preference shifts of international hot money. Their operating logic differs fundamentally from domestic capital and cannot be lumped together. Therefore, simply being bullish or bearish is too one-sided. In the face of sharp short-term volatility, hedging arbitrage strategies may offer the superior approach, though they require extremely strong execution and risk control. My voice was steady, my reasoning clear. The points I raised were based on cutting-edge discussions from top overseas journals just days ago, knowledge that few in the country had caught wind of yet. The auditorium went silent for a beat. Then the analyst's eyes lit up. He leaned forward, intrigued. Oh, tell me more about how you'd structure such a hedge. What factors would you consider? Unfazed, I elaborated concisely, drawing from my obsessive research in my past life as an overworked corporate slave, combined with projections I'd pieced together since arriving in this world. When I finished, the analyst couldn't help but applaud. Excellent. Very sharp market instincts. Young man, what's your name? Would you be interested in an internship at our institute? A buzz of whispers rippled through the hall. Now, the looks directed my way were tinged with surprise and curiosity. I smiled politely. Thank you, Professor. My name is George. I'll consider the internship. As I sat down, I could feel the scorching stares from the front row. Sophia's face was flushed red, her smugness obliterated. Makoto kept his head lowered, but the tight clench of his jaw betrayed his emotions. Chapter 5. A few days later, I was working at an upscale cafe. Among my several part-time jobs, this one paid the highest hourly wage. The environment was nice, and the clientele relatively refined. I was carrying a tray of hand-brewed coffee to a table when the bell at the door chimed. Welcome, I said it out of habit, then looked up and saw Sophia walking in, arm in arm with a well-kept, dignified-looking middle-aged woman whose features resembled hers. No doubt her mother. The moment Sophia spotted me in my waiter's uniform, a malicious glint flashed in her eyes. She raised her voice deliberately, speaking sweetly to her mother. Mom, look, that's the Ito family's long-lost son. He insists on waiting tables. Says he's experiencing life. The ridicule in her tone was undisguised. Mrs. Kim's critical gaze swept over me from head to toe, evaluating me like a defective product. She gave a light, disdainful snort through her nose, carrying the arrogance of the upper class. From such a low background, no wonder he's unpresentable. Stay away from him, bad luck. I kept my expression neutral, set the coffee steadily on the guest's table, and bowed slightly. Here is your coffee. Please enjoy. I ignored the mother and daughter completely. Sophia, frustrated by my indifference, dragged her mother to sit in my section on purpose. When ordering, she nitpicked relentlessly, complaining the water was too cold, then the music too loud. I handled it all professionally, my demeanor calm and precise, leaving no room for error. In contrast, Sophia Kim only appeared like an unreasonable troublemaker. Even Mrs. Kim's expression grew stiff, realizing her daughter was embarrassing herself. At that moment, the cafe door opened again. A woman in a Chanel suit entered. I recognized her figure. It was Monica. She seemed to have come to meet someone. Her eyes swept the room, falling on Sophia and her mother, and then on me, serving them. Her steps faltered, and her brows knit reflexively. Clearly, seeing her own blood relative working a servant's job in public made her feel humiliated. Sophia spotted her too, instantly seizing the chance like finding a savior. She waved eagerly. Monica sis, over here. Monica hesitated briefly, then walked over. Sophia immediately began whining, her voice aggrieved. Monica sis, look at me. I can't even enjoy a cup of coffee with Mom because of him. He's working here and giving us attitude. I happened to arrive with their cake just then. I didn't even lift my eyelids, set down the plate and turned to leave. Stop. Monica's cold voice cut through, carrying her usual commanding tone. George, don't you feel ashamed? You've disgraced the Ito family enough. Quit this job and come home immediately. I finally halted, turned back, and looked at her. My gaze was flat, emotionless, as I asked, the Ito family, what does that have to do with me? You. Monica choked with fury. Mrs. Kim coolly chimed in from the side. Monica, I hate to say it, but this child truly lacks upbringing. He needs proper discipline, or else he'll shame the Ito family wherever he goes. Monica's face darkened further. Just then, from a private booth deeper inside the cafe, a figure stood. It was an elderly man, around 60, sharp-eyed and energetic. He wore a traditional Chinese-style jacket, his presence steady, commanding respect without a word. At his side stood a man who looked like his secretary. The old man walked over slowly. His gaze first fell on me, carrying a trace of subtle appreciation, before shifting toward Monica and Mrs. Kim. His voice was calm yet weighty. Oh, I, for one, believe that earning money through one's own labor, honestly and with dignity, is nothing shameful compared to certain youths who rely on their parents, squander recklessly, and show no respect for the labor of others. This is far more respectable. He hadn't named names, but Sophia and Mrs. Kim's faces instantly flushed purple with embarrassment. Monica froze as well. She recognized him. The province's richest man, Pablo Liu. The Liu family's businesses spanned the entire province, their influence far beyond what the Ito family could compare with. Why was he here? And why was he speaking up for me? Pablo's gaze swept over the stunned faces, then finally rested on me. He gave me a small nod, his tone gentler. Young man, good coffee. Unmoved by insult or favor, rare composure. With that, he left the cafe, accompanied by his secretary. The ones left behind, Monica, Sophia, and Mrs. Kim, were all red-faced as if they had been slapped in public. Sophia, especially, her earlier arrogance gone, leaving only humiliation and shock. I acted as though nothing had happened. I glanced at Monica and said lightly, enjoy, then turned away to continue my work. Monica watched my tall, composed back. Pablo's words, unmoved by insult or favor, rare composure, echoed in her mind. She compared it to the sight of Sophia, pale and trembling beside her, a girl who only knew how to whine and cause trouble, and to Makoto, forever weak and dependent in his wheelchair. For the first time, a deep crack formed in her long-held perception. Perhaps she had truly misjudged this brother who had grown up outside. Sophia, on the other hand, dug her nails into her palms as she glared at my back. Beyond humiliation, she felt a deeper shame that she wasn't even worthy of being considered my opponent. The air in the cafe thickened, heavy and suffocating, as if Pablo's presence lingered even after he had gone, pressing down on Sophia and her mother until their faces turned ashen. They couldn't utter a single word. Monica stood frozen, her fingertips cold. Pablo's phrase, rare composure, burned itself into her mind like a brand. For the first time, she realized with piercing clarity, the brother she had always despised as disgraceful, unworthy, a source of shame for the Ito family. Perhaps he wasn't what she thought. George wasn't bluffing, returning that 100,000. His sharp insights at the lecture, and now Pablo's public recognition, none of it was coincidence. Monica sis. Sophia's voice trembled with disbelief, her eyes moist as she clutched at Monica's hand for reassurance. Who was that old man? Why did he defend him instead of us? Monica abruptly pulled her hand away. The gesture was small, but the distance it carried was undeniable. Without looking at Sophia, she cast one last, complicated glance toward the kitchen where George was working, and said hoarsely, that was Mr. Pablo. Pablo, so what? Sophia started to retort, then choked mid-sentence, her eyes widening in horror. Pablo Liu, the Liu, from Liu Group. Mrs. Kim gasped as well, the arrogance crumbling from her face, leaving only fear and regret. Her Kim family clung to the Ito family's coattails, but in front of the Liu Group, even the Ito family was nothing, and they had just mocked the very person Pablo himself had defended. Monica no longer paid attention to the mother and daughter's stricken faces. Her mind was in turmoil, seized by an emotion she couldn't name, remorse, or dread. Snatching up her bag, she all but fled the cafe in embarrassment. Chapter 6. In the following days, the Ito household grew unusually quiet. Makoto seemed to sense Monica's subtle change. He became even more obedient and fragile, often gazing tearfully out the window, or hesitating to speak to Simon and Helen, hinting that my presence left him uneasy and guilty. His act worked. Simon grew even more dissatisfied with George's immaturity and narrow-mindedness. But this time, Monica didn't rush to comfort him as before. She only watched in silence. One day, the Ito family received a gilded invitation. Pablo was hosting a private banquet at his home, celebrating the success of a major Liu Group project. Nearly every prominent figure in the province had been invited, and so had the Ito family. For them, this was a crucial chance to step into the truly elite circle. Simon treated it with utmost seriousness, ordering the entire family to attend in full formal attire, and that nothing must go wrong. Makoto, how's your health? Can you manage to attend? Helen looked worriedly at his leg, still in plaster. Makoto gave a gentle, resolute smile. Mom, I'm fine. I can't let business be delayed. It's just. He hesitated, then glanced at Monica and Sabrina. Brother, isn't he coming? After all, he's also part of our family. Sabrina immediately curled her lip. What for? Isn't he shameful enough? If he embarrasses us in front of the Liu family, our whole family will be ruined. Simon's stern face showed he felt the same. But suddenly, Monica spoke up. Call him. The whole family stared at her in surprise. Monica avoided Makoto's briefly darkened gaze, keeping her tone as even as she could. Last time, Mr. Liu seemed to take some notice of him if we don't invite him, and Mr. Liu asks, it'll be even worse. Simon considered this for a moment, then nodded. You're right, Monica. You contact him. Tell him to behave himself that day. Say nothing. Just follow along with us. Chapter 7. I received Monica's call while I was in the library doing research. When I heard about the Liu family's banquet, I had no interest at all and was ready to decline. But Monica's next words made me pause. Mr. Pablo may be there. He seemed to appreciate you last time. Pablo, the elder who had spoken up for me at the cafe. The richest man in the province. My thoughts stirred. I had been struggling to gain access to higher-level information and resources. This might be the chance. As for the Ito family's petty drama, it didn't even register in my mind. Time, place. My response was brief. On the other end, Monica seemed to exhale in relief, though her tone carried a trace of complexity as she quickly relayed the details. Finally, she couldn't help adding, dress formally, don't embarrass us. I hung up directly. That evening, the Liu family's estate shone brightly, ablaze with lights, filled with the elite and powerful. When the Ito family arrived, they immediately drew attention. Makoto, pale and fragile, sat in his wheelchair, a pitiful sight. Monica and Sabrina dazzled in their glamorous attire. Simon and Helen too were radiant, but when a young man walked in behind them, more than a few glances turned curious and amused. I had come. I wasn't wearing the expensive suit the Ito family had prepared. Instead, I wore the best of my own clothes, a plain dark suit, modest fabric, but clean, well-fitted, and upright. Amid the glittering jewels and finery, my outfit looked overly simple. Yet there was no trace of timidity in me. My gaze was calm, sweeping the room as if observing, as if I were there simply to carry out a task. Tisk. He actually dared to come. Sophia's voice rang out, deliberately pitched so others could hear. Clinging to her date's arm, she sneered openly. Dressed like that, what does he think this is? A school dance? Her little entourage of socialites tittered along with her. Makoto's eyes darkened briefly when he saw me. Before he quickly softened into deeper frailty, he whispered to Sabrina, second sister, I'm just glad brother came. Please don't blame me. Sabrina rushed to defend him at once. Blame you? Absolutely not. It's his own shamelessness, insisting on tagging along. Simon's face soured as well, believing my attire lowered the Ito family's image. He muttered a warning. Stay close, and keep your mouth shut. I acted as though I hadn't heard. My gaze had already settled on Pablo, who was standing not far away, conversing with others. Pablo noticed us, or rather, noticed me. He finished his conversation and walked straight toward the Ito family. Simon, elated, hurried forward to greet him. Good evening, Chairman Liu. Thank you for the honor of hosting this. But Pablo merely gave him a slight nod, his gaze sliding past Simon until it landed squarely on me. A smile appeared on his face. Gio is here as well. Excellent. That single Gio sent a ripple of silence through the room. All eyes turned to me, full of shock and speculation. Simon's smile froze. Helen looked at a loss. Monica's heart pounded wildly. Sabrina's eyes went wide. Sophia's sneer stuck in her throat. Makoto's grip tightened on the arms of his wheelchair. I stepped forward, calm and unyielding, and said, Good evening, Mr. Liu. Thank you for your invitation. Haha. Splendid, splendid. Pablo looked genuinely pleased, even patting me on the shoulder. Our talk last time was cut short. Tonight, if you're free, let's continue with your market insights. I've a few old friends who would be very interested. The honor would be mine. I replied smoothly. That moment struck like a silent thunderclap in the hearts of everyone present who knew of the Ito family's scandal, the storm of the real versus fake heir. What was this? The true son George, whom the Ito family despised as vulgar and unworthy. Not only had Pablo's special recognition but was even being invited to talk with Pablo and his circle of old friends. Simon's facial muscles twitched as he tried to interject. Chairman Liu, you and George. Only then did Pablo seem to notice him, his smile thinning. President Ito, you've raised a fine son. Keen insight, a rough diamond. The words sounded like praise, but he had never once mentioned the Ito family itself, only me. Simon's smile looked more painful than crying. At that moment, a clear, melodious female voice rang out. Dad, here you are. Uncle Lee and the others are still waiting for you, huh? Everyone turned toward the voice. A young woman in an elegant champagne-colored gown approached. Her beauty was striking, yet her aura was pure and luminous, like a pearl under moonlight, instantly captivating the room. She was Pablo's only daughter, Willow. Willow's gaze swept over the crowd and finally landed on me, carrying a trace of curiosity and inquiry. Clearly, she had overheard her father's words. Pablo smiled and said to her, Willow, come, I'll introduce you. This is the young man I mentioned to you before, the one with keen insight, George. He turned to me. This is my daughter, Willow. I looked at her, my gaze calm and clear, and inclined my head slightly. Miss Liu, good evening. Willow gave a graceful smile and extended her hand. Mr. Wang, good evening. My father rarely speaks so highly of young people. You must be exceptional. We shook hands lightly. That moment shattered the last traces of hope in Makoto, Sophia, and the rest. Not only had I gained Pablo's favor, but I was now naturally being introduced to the very daughter of the Liu family, the heiress they schemed endlessly to ingratiate themselves with. And Willow's gaze toward me held nothing but genuine curiosity and admiration, no trace of disdain. The blood drained from Sophia's face. Just minutes ago, she had mocked me as a pauper, yet now I stood where she dreamed of being, speaking as an equal with Willow. Her jealousy nearly drove her mad. Makoto dug his nails deep into his palms, the plastered leg beneath his cast throbbing faintly. Everything he had painstakingly cultivated, every scrap of affection and attention he had stolen, beside the recognition George now had from Pablo and Willow, it all seemed laughably small. Why? Why should a piece of trash raised in a slum deserve this? Monica stared at George's composed profile, at Willow's genuine smile toward him, and thought of all the scorn and torment their family had heaped upon him. A crushing wave of regret and shame gripped her chest so tightly she could hardly breathe. Simon and Helen exchanged glances, shocked and bewildered. Pablo, as though the impact wasn't heavy enough, smiled and said to us, "You young people have more to talk about, don't waste time with us old men. Willow, take Gio to the garden, it's quieter there." Of course, Willow agreed readily, gesturing politely toward me. I nodded, and under countless stunned, jealous, and disbelieving eyes, I walked calmly beside Willow, leaving the banquet hall for the softly lit, elegant garden outside. The Ito family and Sophia's circle stood frozen in place, their faces a kaleidoscope of emotions. The very person they schemed to drive out and trample in the mud had already risen, out of their sight, to heights they could only look up to, and now, their sneers and insults echoed back as the loudest slaps to their own faces. Night wind drifted from the garden, carrying the fragrance of blossoms, but it could not sweep away the cold dread in the Ito family's hearts. In the garden, the air was fresh with dew, gently separating the glittering banquet hall from this quieter world. The champagne tower's refracted light rippled across Willow's gown. She tilted her head toward me, her eyes clean and bright, filled with genuine curiosity. My father is rarely so warm to young people. Her voice wasn't loud, blending naturally into the night air. He said that last time at the cafe, in just a few sentences, you pointed out the key risks of the Xinhua project. At the time, they were still arguing internally about whether to increase investment. I was a little surprised Pablo would discuss such things with his daughter. I smiled but didn't claim the credit. I just happened to notice some public data and did a bit of cross-checking. Mr. Liu overstated it, using public data to deduce the hidden tariff adjustments on raw materials and their unusual correlation with port throughput. That's hardly a coincidence. Willow blinked, a trace of sly amusement in her eyes. I looked into it later myself. It was exactly as you said. You're impressive. Her tone was open and straightforward, her admiration genuine, free of flattery or calculation. I could feel that this daughter of the Liu family was nothing like Sophia or Sabrina, those spoiled heiresses. She was intelligent, with a steady sense of value all her own. We strolled slowly along the cobblestone path, talking about market trends, emerging technologies, even the cross-applications of obscure fields, drawing on my knowledge from before I transmigrated, combined with what I'd gathered in this world. I offered perspectives that repeatedly lit up her eyes. Willow listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions. Her quick mind earned my private respect. It was a rare sense of meeting a worthy opponent, not about background, but about intellect. Inside the banquet hall, the massive floor-to-ceiling windows framed the garden like a gilded painting, capturing the two of us walking side by side. The sight was harmonious, and dazzlingly so. Sophia's grip on her wine glass nearly crushed the stem, her teeth grinding. Why him? Is Willow blind? Makoto's face was white as paper, his hand beneath the blanket digging mercilessly into his leg. The fragile act he had so carefully crafted was collapsing, leaving only venomous hatred running like poison through his veins. He couldn't understand. How could a pauper, a waiter, know such things? How could he so calmly converse with Willow? That should have been his place. All the attention, admiration, favor, it should have been his. Monica watched in silence, waves of turmoil crashing through her heart. She couldn't hear what we were saying, but Willow's rapt expression and genuine admiration couldn't be faked. She recalled every time she had scolded and despised me. Her face burned as if lashed by an invisible whip. She was wrong, so wrong it was laughable. Sabrina, simpler-minded, only felt shock and a petulant envy at being outshone. She muttered, "What rotten luck." Simon's expression shifted unpredictably, noticing Pablo's occasional smiling glances toward the garden. Even he couldn't miss it anymore. George's value might far exceed anything he had imagined. He had only ever thought of preventing this son from disgracing the Ito family. He had never considered that perhaps this son didn't need the Ito family at all, that maybe the Ito family might need him. Helen was utterly bewildered, looking from the garden to her family's conflicted faces, not knowing what to do. In the later half of the banquet, Willow and I returned to the hall. She was soon called away by elders, leaving me to fetch a drink on my own. Sophia seized her chance, stomping toward me in her heels, her voice shrill with jealousy. "George, don't get cocky. Don't think clinging to Miss Lou makes a barnyard chicken into a phoenix. Deep down, you're still nothing but a filthy." "Sophia." A cold voice cut her off. Monica had walked over, her face stormy. For the first time, she fixed Sophia with a sharp, merciless glare. "Watch your words and remember where you are. This is the Lou residence, not a place for your tantrums." Sophia's eyes widened in disbelief. "Monica sis, you're scolding me, for him. I'm reminding you not to bring trouble onto yourself or the Kim family." Monica's voice held no warmth. Her gaze even flicked coldly toward Makoto, who sat pale-faced in his wheelchair. I raised a brow, slightly surprised. This young lady, had she finally begun to use her head? I had no interest in watching the drama unfold. I bypassed the frozen Sophia, picked up a glass of soda water, and walked straight to the terrace for some air. The banquet finally ended. On the ride back, silence pressed down like death. Inside the long limousine, the air was so heavy it suffocated. Makoto leaned against the seat with his eyes closed, lashes trembling as if enduring unbearable pain and grievance. Sabrina wanted to comfort him, but Monica stopped her with a single glance. Simon rubbed his temples, then finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Monica, that Mr. Lou, what else did he say to George?" Monica kept her gaze on the city lights flashing past the window, her tone flat. "Nothing much. Just said he appreciated him, asked Miss Willow to show him the garden." She paused, then added, "Mr. Lou called him Gio, like they were close." Bang. Simon slammed his fist onto the soft leather armrest, his chest heaving violently. It was regret, frustration, and the humiliation of losing face completely. Helen flinched in fear. "Dad," Makoto opened his eyes, tears shimmering. "It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, Big Brother wouldn't have left home. Wouldn't have met all this trouble and made the family suffer. Once, that pitiful act would have earned him the family's love and comfort instantly. But this time, Simon only gave him an irritated glance, saying nothing. Monica turned her face deliberately toward the window. Even Sabrina, for once, stayed silent. Makoto's heart plunged into icy depths. The next day was the weekend. I still rose early. I had a tutoring job in the morning, and planned to spend the afternoon in the library. As I stepped out of the dormitory building, that familiar black luxury car was parked by the curb again. The door opened. Monica stepped out alone. She was dressed simply today, her face tired, her gaze complicated as she looked at me. "Talk," she asked, her tone no longer commanding, almost carrying a trace of request. I checked the time. 10 minutes. "I'm in a hurry." Monica drew in a deep breath. "Yesterday." "I'm sorry." I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "And before. For many things, we were wrong." "I'm sorry." It was difficult for her to get the words out, but she forced them anyway. "Maybe, we all misunderstood you." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I corrected her calmly. "You chose to believe only what you wanted to believe." A faint flush crept onto Monica's cheeks. She couldn't argue. Dad wants you to come home." She changed the subject. "He said he can raise the limit on that card he gave you. If you don't like your current major, you can switch, or even study abroad. The family will support you. After all, you are an Ito." I let out a quiet, derisive laugh, as if I'd just heard a joke. "An Ito?" I repeated the words, the mockery in my tone leaving Monica no place to hide. "My surname is Wong. And tell Mr. Simon this, Mr. Lou's regard, the one he values so much, isn't something he can buy with Ito money or handouts." I paused, meeting Monica's widened eyes, and tore off the last shred of pretense. "You don't want a son back. You just suddenly realized this son might be useful, and want to invest early, right?" Monica's face turned deathly pale. I didn't mean, how can you think? How I think doesn't matter." I cut her off. "What matters is, I don't need it. Money, future, Connections, I'll earn them myself. As for the Ito family, the best support you can give me is staying as far away from me as possible. I finished speaking, no longer sparing Monica's pale face a glance, and turned away. Monica stood rooted to the spot, staring at the tall, resolute figure merging into the flow of students across campus. For the first time, she clearly realized they had lost this brother. It wasn't that he had stormed out in anger. It was that, from beginning to end, he had never once thought of coming back. What they considered charity and gifts were worth nothing in his eyes. She stumbled back into the car, dazed. Sabrina asked eagerly, "Well, did he agree to come back?" "Dad said as long as he does. Everything else is negotiable." Monica slowly shook her head, her voice hollow. "He's not coming back." "What? And now he's acting all high and mighty?" Sabrina shrieked. "Because." Monica closed her eyes, exhausted as if she'd lost a battle. "What he wants, we can't give. And what we could give, he never wanted in the first place." Sabrina froze, not understanding. Monica didn't explain further. "Some things, you only realize their weight after you've lost them. And some wounds, once inflicted, can never be undone." The luxury car lingered under the dormitory for a long time before gliding away silently, like a dim shadow dissolving into the city traffic. I put the brief meeting behind me and hurried off to teach my student. The child's mother, a gentle middle-aged teacher, handed me a bottle of water and praised with a smile. "Mr. Wang, you're so patient. Our child has improved a lot recently, and he even says he wants to apply to your university in the future." I smiled faintly as I took the water. This kind of recognition and respect earned by one's own ability was simple, clean, and solid. That afternoon in the library, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Wang. Hello, this is Willow. Sorry to disturb you. My father asked me to pass along some industry reports he mentioned. He thought you might find them useful. Would it be convenient for me to send them to you?" Slightly surprised, I replied. "Thank you. That's too much trouble. A download link or email will be fine." Soon Willow responded with a Cloud Drive link, followed by another message. "Actually, I have a class project on supply chain fintech, the topic you mentioned last time. I have a few questions, and I wonder if you'd be willing to advise me." Seeking advice was an excuse. Extending goodwill was the real intent. Miss Lu certainly knew how to handle things with tact. I opened the link. Inside were several in-depth industry analyses marked for internal reference, exactly the kind of material I needed. Pablo's favor carried real weight. I replied to Willow, "I've received the reports, thank you very much. As for questions, I wouldn't dare call it advice, but we can discuss. I'm free Wednesday afternoon." Chapter 8. The atmosphere in the Ito family villa was like the dead stillness before a storm. The news Monica had brought back made Simon's face so dark it seemed he could wring water from it. He locked himself in the study for half a day, and when he finally came out, his gaze fell on Makoto, still weakly shedding tears on the sofa. For the first time, his eyes held not complete affection, but scrutiny and irritation. He said, "We can't afford it." Simon repeated Monica's words, as if he had heard a fantasy. "He's just a poor student, and we, the Ito family, can't afford what he wants." "What does he want? Heaven itself." Helen sobbed softly. Maybe it's because we treated him poorly before, and hurt his heart. Hurt his heart." Sabrina shrieked, unable to accept George's ingratitude. "He's just an ungrateful mutt, gets a bit of luck, praised a couple of times by Mr. Lu, and now he's floating in the clouds. I think he's just putting on airs, waiting for us to beg him." Beg him. Simon seemed stabbed by that word. Makoto began coughing right on cue, his face pale as paper, his voice weak but distinct. "Dad, Mom, Sister, don't fight because of me, it's all my fault. If brother refuses to come back because he hates me, I can leave instead." Tears slid down his cheeks as he struggled to rise from the wheelchair. In the past, this act had always worked flawlessly, but today, Simon only frowned at him, not stopping him immediately. Monica even turned her head away. Only Sabrina rushed forward, holding him down. "Makoto, don't say such nonsense. This is your home. The one who should leave is that ungrateful bastard." "Enough." Simon suddenly barked, his sharp gaze sweeping between Makoto and Monica before finally fixing on Makoto's leg encased in thick plaster. His voice was cold and cutting as he asked, "Monica, last time you said the surveillance camera on the stairs was broken. Was it really broken?" Monica's heart gave a violent jolt. She lowered her eyes and muttered vaguely, The property manager said it was due to aging wires." Makoto's heart skipped a beat, his fingertips digging into his palm. Simon asked nothing further. He only gave a cold snort, turned back into the study, and slammed the door shut with a heavy bang. Once the seed of suspicion is planted, it grows wildly in silence. Chapter 9. A few days later, the Kim family hosted a charity auction dinner. The Ito family showed up. Of course, Simon needed to maintain social appearances. and he had heard that the Liu family might also be in attendance. Makoto still sat in his wheelchair, looking weak and helpless. As soon as Sophia spotted the Ito family, she clung to Makoto's arm with feigned affection, though her eyes flickered with jealousy and resentment as she scanned the room, searching for the figure that made her grit her teeth in hatred. "Uncle, Auntie, don't worry," Sophia said with smug assurance, her tone firm with meaning. Someone of that level would never get into an event like this. Just as her words fell, a faint stir rippled through the entrance of the banquet hall. Everyone instinctively turned to look. Under the glimmering lights, George walked in. He still wasn't in any ostentatious tuxedo, but this time wore a perfectly tailored dark suit. The fabric and craftsmanship radiated visible quality, framing his tall figure and steady, noble aura. And at his side stood none other than Willow, dazzling in a starry gradient evening gown, radiant beyond words. Willow tilted her head slightly, smiling as she spoke softly to him. He bent just a little to listen, lips curved in a subtle arc. The two walked in side by side, instantly drawing the attention of the entire room. That's George," Sabrina blurted out, her eyes wide as saucers. Sophia's smile froze completely, as if someone had struck her across the face with brutal force. All color drained from her face, leaving only stark pallor and twisted jealousy. How could this be? How could he possibly deserve to appear with Willow, and dressed like that, looking every bit the gentleman? Makoto's breath caught, his hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair so tightly they creaked, as the jealousy that threatened to devour him surged back with fury. Simon and Helen were utterly stunned. With Willow at my side, I walked straight toward the circle where Pablo was seated. Pablo saw me and smiled, beckoning me over, then introduced me to several elders whose identities were clearly extraordinary. I remained calm, my manners polished and speech steady, showing no trace of stage fright. The very son the Ito family had dismissed as unworthy, a burden needing their charity, was now standing with ease at the very center of the circle they could only look up to. Clap, clap, clap. Invisible slaps landed one after another, burning hot across every Ito family face. Sophia suddenly tore her hand from Makoto's arm, her chest heaving violently. She felt as if everyone in the room was laughing at her, mocking her self-assured declaration from earlier. Unable to endure it, she stomped her foot and stormed off toward the restroom. Makoto watched her departing figure, his eyes dark with a venomous glare. The auction began, with item after item presented. One piece in particular, a Ming-era Dotsai porcelain bowl in pristine condition, caught Simon's attention. He was tempted to acquire it, both to expand his collection and to flaunt the Ito family's strength before Pablo. As the bidding reached its peak, only Simon and a wealthy businessman from out of town remained. The price had already been pushed rather high. Simon frowned, just about to add one last bid to secure it. Then, a calm voice rang out from not far away. 5 million. A direct raise of 300,000. The entire room stirred in shock. The bidder was me. Simon whipped his head around, staring at me in disbelief. Where did he get that kind of money? Was he insane? Even Willow looked at me with a flicker of surprise, but my eyes remained on the porcelain bowl, expression unchanged, as if I had merely announced an ordinary number. The out-of-town businessman shook his head and gave up. 5 million. First call, 5 million. Second call, 5 million. Third call, sold. Congratulations to this gentleman. The gavel came down. The spotlight fell on me. I rose to my feet, and under countless probing, astonished, and envious gazes, walked calmly toward the backstage area to complete the formalities. Simon's face was ashen, his hands trembling. It wasn't the money that pained him, it was the humiliation of losing control. The item Simon had coveted had been taken, effortlessly, by the very son he had discarded as worthless, and in a way he couldn't even fathom. Where had George gotten the money? It could only be from the Liu family. The Liu family valued George this much, to such an extent. Monica stared at her father's twisted expression, then at the admiring glances cast toward George, and finally at the direction he had gone backstage. A hollow chill spread in her chest. What had they truly missed out on? Meanwhile, in the restroom, Sophia stood before the mirror, touching up her makeup, but her trembling fingers smeared the lipstick outside the lines. In a fit of rage, she hurled the tube onto the floor. The stall door opened, and out walked a woman in a Chanel suit, delicate features framed by an expression tinged with arrogance and appraisal. It was Maria, the eldest daughter of the Bai family. Her family's status rivaled that of the Kims, and she had never gotten along with Sophia. Through the mirror, Maria observed Sophia's disheveled state and chuckled softly. Well, what's wrong, Miss Kim? Who's gotten under your skin? Don't tell me, seeing the Liu family's new favorite made you upset. Sophia spun around, eyes red. What nonsense are you spouting? Maria dried her hands leisurely. You know perfectly well whether it's nonsense. But let me give you some advice, don't waste your efforts. George is now Liu's favored protege. practically inseparable from Willow under everyone's watchful eyes. That sickly fake heir of yours, Makoto, he doesn't stand a chance. With that, she swept out gracefully. Sophia trembled where she stood, Maria's words stabbing her like venomous needles. Willow, again. Willow, and George, the two people she hated most. Jealousy and resentment consumed what little reason she had left. She suddenly stormed out, her gaze locking on me as I returned from backstage alongside Willow. As I passed her, Sophia seemed to stumble in her heels. Letting out a sharp cry, she lurched straight into me, the half-filled glass of champagne in her hand, accidentally spilling across my expensive suit jacket. "Ah, I'm so sorry, so sorry." Sophia steadied herself and quickly apologized, her voice dripping with false contrition yet edged with malice and secret delight. "I lost my balance. Wong, your suit must be expensive, right? I really didn't mean it." Her ploy succeeded, all eyes turned toward us. The dark liquid spread quickly across the light fabric of my suit, leaving an ugly stain, strikingly conspicuous. Willow frowned. The Ito family noticed too, Sabrina smirked with glee, and Makoto's eyes gleamed with a cold, cruel satisfaction. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I stopped, glanced down at the ruined front of my suit, then lifted my gaze towards Sophia, whose poor acting skills and venomous intent were laid bare in her eyes. My expression remained calm, without the panic or rage everyone expected, just as Sophia secretly rejoiced, preparing to offer a few more sincere apologies. I spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut clearly through the suddenly hushed corner. "It's fine." I paused. Then, under her startled stare, unhurriedly undid the buttons of the soiled suit jacket. With casual ease, I slipped it off and handed it to a nearby staff member. Then I raised my eyes to Sophia, my gaze as indifferent as if I were looking at something utterly insignificant. "It's just a suit," I said evenly. "If Miss Kim enjoys spilling, spill away." Beneath the suit, I wore a finely tailored white shirt without the jacket. My broad shoulders and narrow waist were more defined, my bearing even more striking under the brilliant lights of the hall. The stain was nothing but a meaningless backdrop. I even allowed a faint smile to touch my lips, adding lightly, though the words sliced sharper than any blade, shattering all of Sophia's false confidence in an instant. "After all, you can afford it." The staff quietly carried away the costly, stained jacket, left in only the crisp white shirt. I appeared even more composed and dignified, the minor blemish irrelevant in the grandeur of the moment. "After all, you can afford it." The phrase, tossed out so lightly, fell like a hammer blow. Sophia's forced smile crumbled. Yes, she could certainly afford to pay for a suit, but the meaning was clear. She was only fit to pay compensation for such petty mishaps, while I dismissed her entirely. That detached contempt, loftier than anger, humiliated her 100-fold more than any insult could. Those subtle, lingering gazes around her pierced into Sophia like needles. Her cheeks burned hot, and she wished she could crawl into a hole in the ground. Willow stepped forward, her eyes sweeping coldly over Sophia's rigid figure before turning to me and asking softly, "Are you all right? I'll have the driver fetch a spare jacket." "No need," I replied evenly. It was getting a bit warm anyway. We conversed as if no one else were there, leaving Sophia entirely abandoned, as though she were merely a clumsy waitress who had spilled wine, not even worth a second glance. Sophia dug her nails into her palms, the sting of humiliation cutting deep. With a sharp stomp, she spun on her heel and bolted from the hall, her retreat frantic and disgraceful. On the Ito family's side, silence reigned. Makoto Ito watched Sophia flee in defeat, watched George's insufferable composure, watched Willow stand firmly at his side, and the poison in his heart threatened to consume him whole. Why? Why was it always him? Why did that bastard always end up standing above him? Simon's face was dark as iron. George's every gesture carried a natural ease, as though he were born to stand beneath the spotlight. The open favor from both Pablo and Willow pierced Simon's long-held convictions like thorns. For the first time, he realized with brutal clarity, this son had perhaps never needed the Ito family at all. Rather, it might be the Ito family that had lost something immeasurable. Regret and dread, sharp and suffocating, seized his chest. The remainder of the auction was agony for the Itos, each moment spent on pins and needles. Meanwhile, I sat with Willow near Pablo, occasionally leaning in to exchange a quiet word. Our posture was natural, equal. No one could mistake me anymore for a penniless youth needing the Ito family's charity. When the evening drew to a close, Simon nearly forced himself forward, determined to greet Pablo, maybe even to catch a word with me. But just as he approached, Pablo was smiling at me. "Next week's economic forum, if you're free, come along with me. A few old friends of mine would like to meet you again." I nodded calmly. "Of course. Thank you, Mr. Liu." Simon froze, his words stuck in his throat, watching helplessly as Pablo patted my shoulder before leaving with his daughter. I went alone to collect my jacket. The moment was slipping away. Simon drew a deep breath and hurried toward me, his tone carrying an urgency and caution he himself had never shown before. "George." I slid into the spare jacket handed over by a staff member, an equally costly, classic cut, and paused briefly, turning my head to regard him with distant eyes. "President Ito, is there something you need?" That single, President Ito, chilled Simon to the bone. Forcing a smile, he said, "The porcelain you won tonight, it really is a fine piece. You have a good eye. If the money isn't quite enough, or if you need anything else, just tell your FA, tell the family." It was as if I'd just heard the most absurd joke. My lips curved faintly, coldly. "No need. It's only a small sum. I can afford it. A small sum. 1.5 million, a small sum." Simon nearly choked on his breath, staring as I adjusted my collar with ease and walked decisively toward the exit, without sparing him another glance. Chapter 10. Late at night. Inside the Ito family villa, the weight of failure and frustration pressed down so heavily it felt like the living room would burst. Makoto was pushed off to his room by a caretaker. Before leaving, he cast a sorrowful glance at Simon, but his father's eyes were vacant, fixed on nothing, not even noticing him. Sabrina finally snapped, hurling a cushion across the room. "What's he so arrogant about? He's nothing without clinging to the Liu family's thigh. Without them, he's nobody." "Shut up." Simon's roar cracked through the silence, veins bulging at his temples. Without the Liu family, he could still casually throw down 1.5 million. Without the Liu family, he could still make Pablo take notice. "Can you do that? Can Makoto?" Sabrina froze, stunned into shrinking back. She had never seen her father lose control like this. Helen whimpered, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then, what do we do now?" Monica rubbed her temples. Exhaustion etched into her voice. "Dad, Mom, maybe we really were wrong. Wrong from the very beginning. We never gave him any support. Now he's achieved things we couldn't even imagine. All on his own. We have no right to demand anything from him anymore. No right." Simon reacted as if she'd struck him, shooting to his feet and pacing the room in agitation. "He's my blood. He carries the Ito family's name. What's his is the Ito family's. The Liu connection must remain in Ito hands. It must." His eyes gleamed with a terrifying mix of greed, panic, and desperation. Losing the Liu family connection would be a devastating blow. Rivals would pounce, and the Ito family could be crushed. He would never allow it. "But he doesn't acknowledge us at all." Helen's voice was small, despairing. Simon stopped pacing, his expression sinking into something dark and vicious. "He doesn't acknowledge us. He doesn't get to choose. As long as he's my son, he will serve the Ito family." His gaze snapped to Monica. "Monica, you find a way to reach him again." Soft persuasion, hard pressure, whatever it takes. "Tell him, if he helps us secure the Liu family connection, I'll even consider giving him a share of the Ito company." Monica stared at her father in shock, as though seeing him for the first time. Even now, all he could think about was binding George with profits and using him as leverage. And another thing, Simon's eyes swept over Sabrina and Helen. "You two as well. Go after him, cry, beg, throw a fit, if it comes to it. Drag him back kicking and screaming." Sabrina cowered in silence, too frightened to speak. Helen could only sob. Monica felt nothing but an icy hollowness spread through her chest. At last, she understood, whether it was Makoto's manipulative fragility or her father's current threats and bribes. It was all the same at the core. None of them had ever truly seen George as someone worthy of respect. Chapter 11. My life remained as busy and fulfilling as ever. I attended the economic forum, sitting right beside Pablo. Calm and collected, I conversed freely with figures who often appeared in financial headlines. Whenever I voiced an opinion, it went straight to the point, drawing surprised glances from the crowd. Willow was often at my side, and the two of us grew increasingly familiar with each other. I discovered that Willow was not the kind of heiress untouched by the dust of the world. She had her own sharp insights and a perceptive mind. During the breaks at the forum, she would even bring up case studies from Liu Group's smaller, non-core projects. Each time, I offered a perspective that left her pleasantly surprised. Little by little, beyond business discussions, we began sharing the occasional coffee or meeting at the library, each quietly reading our own books. The companionship felt natural, almost like kindred spirits. Pablo clearly approved, even teasing us from time to time. One afternoon after class, as I stepped out of the teaching building, a figure blocked my way. It was Helen. Her eyes were swollen, as if she had been crying for hours. She clutched my arm, her voice breaking. "George, please, I beg you, come home. It was all my fault before. I'm sorry, I wronged you. Your father admits he was wrong too. Ito Corp needs the Liu family support now. You can't just stand by and watch us suffer." Her voice drew curious looks from the nearby students. I frowned slightly, and without a flicker of emotion, pulled my arm free. "Mrs. Ito, you've mistaken me for someone else." Helen wept harder. "George, how can you be so heartless? I'm your mother." My gaze turned cold. When it's convenient, I'm your son. When it's not, I'm just the disgraceful poor boy. The Ito family's logic, I don't share it. I brushed past her and walked away. Helen collapsed onto the ground, sobbing uncontrollably as she watched my resolute back vanish into the crowd. 2 days later, while Willow and I were at a quiet bar outside campus discussing a modeling algorithm, Sabrina appeared. This time, her tone was forceful, almost threatening. "George," Dad said, "if you come back and help the company through this crisis, you'll never lack benefits in the Ito family. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." I didn't even lift my eyelids. Instead, I turned to Willow and said, "It's noisy here. Let's change locations." Willow nodded, picked up her bag, and together we walked out, leaving Sabrina standing there ignored. Sabrina stomped her foot in frustration but didn't dare make a bigger scene in front of Willow. Soft pleas or hard threats, both had failed. When Simon heard the news, he smashed his most treasured inkstone in a fit of rage. Ungrateful son, that ungrateful wretch. Chapter 12. A week later, an explosive piece of news shook the city's business world. The Lu Group officially launched Project Dawn, an ambitious incubation initiative designed to support innovative tech enterprises. The initial investment alone was staggering, but what truly stunned everyone was the name of one of the project's appointed leads. George. Though I was listed as a deputy, anyone with eyes could see it for what it was. Pablo was personally paving the way for me and placing immense trust in my abilities. It meant I had officially stepped into the Lu Group's inner circle, gaining real power and resources. When the news reached the Ito household, it hit like an earthquake. Simon sat in his study, staring at the article on his computer screen for an entire hour without moving. His face was ashen, as though he had aged 10 years in an instant. He had still been entertaining fantasies about luring George back with Ito family shares. Now, that thought looked laughable. The position of Project Dawn's leadership, and the potential influence it carried, was worth far more than the scraps Ito Corp could offer. He had completely lost the chance to control this son, and more devastating still, he had completely lost the chance to ride Lu Group's coattails. Regret and fear engulfed him until he was nearly drowning. Meanwhile, at the Kim household, Sophia went into a frenzy, smashing everything in sight. Maria even made a kind phone call to congratulate her. "Oh, Miss Kim, did you see the news? That pauper you look down on is now Pablo Lu's favored protege. From now on, shouldn't you call him Director Wong? Ah yes, I recall you once poured wine all over him, didn't you? The way your family and Ito treated George, it's already the talk of the circle. Imagine how many good days you'll have left now." Sophia screamed and hurled the phone to the ground. When Makoto heard the news, he locked himself in his room, shattering everything he could reach, like a man possessed. Why him? That worthless piece of trash from the slums. Why was he always the one stepping on Makoto's head? Everything Makoto had painstakingly built crumbled like paper before true strength and opportunity. Endless jealousy and dread gnawed at him. He was finished. Deep down, he knew it. Once George truly held power, he would never let Makoto off. And as for the Ito family, they were finished too. Night fell, casting the Ito villa in a pall of gloom and despair. High above the city, I stood in Lu Group's skyscraper office, gazing out at the sea of glittering lights below. My phone buzzed with a message from Willow. "Congratulations, Director Wong. Don't be late for tomorrow's meeting." Smiling kitten emoji. I smiled and replied with a simple, "Okay." A new challenge was only just beginning. As for those irrelevant people and their petty schemes, they had long since been left behind. The announcement of Project Dawn was like a boulder hurled into a restless pond, the ripples sweeping away Ito family's last shred of hope. Simon locked himself in his study for an entire day. When he finally emerged, the streaks of white at his temples seemed more pronounced, and his eyes were dull with defeat, looking at Helen, trembling in unease, and Sabrina, whose face was full of unwillingness but laced with panic. Then glancing at Makoto's firmly shut bedroom door. This time, he did not go over to comfort anyone. He only spoke, voice hoarse and carrying the weight of finality. "File for bankruptcy reorganization." With those words, the fate of the Ito family was sealed. Having lost their final hope of salvaging ties with the Lu family, Ito Corp, the ship already riddled with holes, was finally sinking. Helen collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. Sabrina was dumbstruck, murmuring in disbelief. How could this happen? "Dad, can't we think of another way? Go to him, beg him." "Beg?" Simon let out a bitter laugh, his smile uglier than tears. "Beg with what? He's now the personally appointed head of Project Dawn. The Ito family's entire fortune combined isn't even a fraction of that project's first-round investment. Why would he even look our way?" The weight of regret gnawed at his heart, so sharp and crushing he could barely stand upright. If only. When George was first brought back, they had shown him a shred of sincerity, a touch of warmth, the slightest bit of respect. Would the ending today have been different? But in this world, There was never such a thing as if. Meanwhile, the Kim family reacted swiftly. Kim's father delivered a harsh warning to Sophia. From now on, you are forbidden to cause George trouble and stop clinging to that fake heir from the Ito family. The Itos are finished, can't you see that? Sophia screamed in unwillingness. Why, that bastard. Shut up. Kim's father slapped her across the face, the force snapping her head to the side, because with just a flick of his finger, he could make life hell for the Kim family as well. If you want to die, don't drag us down with you. Step out of line again, and I'll cut off all your credit cards and ship you abroad. Clutching her stinging cheek, Sophia was stunned into silence. At last, fear drowned out the jealousy, and inside his room, Makoto listened through the crack in the door to the chaos and sobs outside. His face showed no expression, only the pallor of utter despair. He was finished. The Ito family was finished. Everything he had schemed, fought, and stolen for was nothing but a mirage. Worse, it had become the very noose tightening around his neck. His hatred for George had already rotted into something deeper, a bone-deep, soul-crushing fear. Chapter 13. 1 month later, the Lu Corporation's annual gala. This event drew nearly all of the province's top elites, magnates, socialites, power brokers. The venue brimmed with grandeur, flashing glasses of champagne, dazzling gowns, and carefully rehearsed laughter. It was the perfect stage for Lu Corp to display its power and influence, and for others to observe the winds of change and grasp at new alliances. The Ito family did not receive an invitation. With bankruptcy and restructuring looming over them, they had already been silently exiled from this circle. Sophia followed her father to the venue. Dressed in an expensive gown but shrinking into a corner, no longer daring to flaunt herself, her eyes darted nervously, terrified of catching sight of the men she both hated and feared most. Maria, on the other hand, shone brilliantly. Arm in arm with her date, she radiated confidence. Spotting Sophia's cowering state, she deliberately walked over. Well, Miss Kim is unusually quiet tonight. Not cheering on your dear Makoto. Oh, that's right, rumor has it the Ito family is about to collapse. Sophia's face flushed red, then pale. She wanted to rip Maria's smug smile apart but didn't dare utter a word in protest. At the heart of the ballroom, Pablo laughed and mingled effortlessly with several heavyweights, and standing by his side, dressed in a tailored suit, poised and steady, was George, holding a glass of wine. I spoke with composure, my insights sharp and my demeanor unshakable. No one could possibly connect me with the so-called pauper who had been working in a fast food restaurant only months before. Countless eyes fell on me, some admiring, some calculating, some sycophantic, and some wary. Chairman Lu, you've truly struck gold, a real estate tycoon chuckled, raising his glass. President George is young, capable, and visionary. With Project Dawn in his hands, the future looks limitless. Pablo roared with laughter, making no effort to hide his appreciation. The young man earned it himself. I only provided the stage. At that moment, Willow approached gracefully with a glass of juice. She stood naturally by my side, greeting the elders with a bright smile. Her pale golden gown glowed under the lights, elegant and radiant. Standing together, the two of us drew murmurs of admiration, an impeccable match, dazzling as if destined. Pablo's eyes sparkled with joy. He clapped his hands, and the music came to a halt. The room hushed, all eyes converging. Taking the microphone, his booming voice carried across the hall. Thank you all for gracing us tonight. Since we're gathered here, I also have a piece of joyous news to share. He paused, gaze affectionate as it settled on Willow and me. My daughter Willow and my dear protege George have found themselves truly kindred spirits. After much time together, they've decided to enter into a formal relationship. As her father, nothing makes me happier, so let me make it official tonight, in front of you all. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the hall erupted into thunderous applause and warm congratulations. Congratulations, Chairman Lu. Congratulations, President Wang. Congratulations, Miss Lu. A perfect match. Truly a couple made in heaven. Blessings filled the air, echoing one after another. Bathed in the spotlight, I smiled, glancing toward Willow with warmth in my eyes. Her cheeks tinged pink, but she stood tall and poised, graciously receiving the waves of well wishes. In that moment, I stood upon the radiant summit of success, wealth, status, love, respect, all of it, I held firmly in my hands, earned by my own ability. In the corner, Sophia watched the scene, her nails digging deep into her palms. Yet she felt no pain, only an endless chill of despair. Maria's mocking gaze cut across her like a blade. She could no longer remain humiliated. She turned and fled the ballroom. Meanwhile, the Ito villa lay shrouded in darkness. Simon sat slumped on the sofa, staring at the local financial news coverage of the Lu Corporation's gala. The camera happened to capture Pablo's announcement, the moment George and Willow smiled at one another. Simon's eyes locked onto the radiant, untouchable sun on the screen. His vision blurred red, his body trembling violently. He bent forward, coughing with a gut-wrenching force that tore tears down his weathered face. Helen sat beside him, silently weeping. Sabrina stood frozen, mouth agape, watching the younger brother she had once scorned, mocked as a pauper and a bastard. Now he was surrounded by the province's most powerful, embraced as Pablo's chosen son-in-law, a man whose single word could decide the fate of countless enterprises. For the first time, she felt bone-deep regret and fear. Upstairs, from Makoto's room, came the guttural sound of a caged beast in despair, followed by the heavy thud of something crashing to the floor. All the bitterness, envy, and scheming. At this moment, they were nothing but the cruelest of jokes. They had lost him completely, utterly, forever. On the television screen, George's calm, steady smile shone, a victor's smile, the smile of someone who had long since cast away the mud and humiliation of the past, leaving it all far behind.